In a galaxy completely consumed by apocalyptic conflict, there are certain military engagements that even the demigod Primarchs would consider far too profoundly stupid to record in the annals of history. We are not talking about a glorious final stand for a vital planetary capital. We are not talking about a desperate defense of a sacred holy relic or a brilliant tactical maneuver to halt a massive alien invasion. We are talking about a single, unremarkable hole in the ground, a 3-kilometer stretch of rotting mud, situated on a completely dead, strategically worthless continent. And for the absolute privilege of maintaining ownership of this specific mud pit, the Imperium of Man willingly sacrificed exactly 1 million human lives over the agonizing span of 14 consecutive years. Today, we're not going to discuss martial glory or heroic sacrifice. We're going to dissect the purest, most unadulterated manifestation of holy stupidity within the Astra Militarum. We're going to audit the profound cosmic tragedy that occurs when a single trench becomes infinitely more valuable than the oceans of blood poured directly into it. To comprehend the sheer, staggering absurdity of this specific slaughter, you first need to understand the terrifying psychological framework of the Imperial Departmentum Unitorum. To the faceless scribes and logistical overlords residing on Terra, a designated position on a hololithic map is never merely a set of geographical coordinates. It is an infallible divine mandate. The very moment the alphanumeric designation, Trench 47B, was officially printed on a sanctioned parchment, that specific stretch of dirt underwent an immediate theological transformation. It stopped being a tactical emplacement and instantly became sacred ground, to be held or recaptured until the absolute final drop of human blood was expended. The Munitorum operates entirely devoid of context. The brutal reality of the battlefield is completely irrelevant to the pristine mathematics of the filing cabinet. It genuinely did not matter to High Command that Trench 47B possessed zero strategic value. It did not matter that enemy forces had already bypassed the position entirely and surrounded it from 3 separate directions. It did not even matter that the trench itself was currently filled waist-deep with the rotting, unburied corpses of friendly forces. The 117th Regiment, officially designated the Cadian Remnant, despite the tragic reality that virtually none of the current personnel had ever actually set foot on the shattered world of Cadia, was deployed into this suffocating meat grinder. They were issued a remarkably simple, devastatingly final operational directive: do not take a single step backward. For 14 agonizing years, the 117th obeyed that holy command. They did not retreat. They certainly did not advance. They simply stood in the freezing rain and died. Every single day, heavy enemy artillery systematically pounded their position into a lunar landscape. Every single night, exhausted survivors launched desperate, completely futile counterattacks that achieved nothing except generating more corpses. Every single week, colossal dropships descended from the bruised sky, depositing thousands of fresh, terrified reinforcements directly into the mud, the vast majority of whom would be violently extinguished within their first 3 hours of deployment. It was a perpetual, perfectly optimized factory designed exclusively for the mass production of human misery. The absolute, breathtaking absurdity of this arrangement is perfectly encapsulated by their commanding commissar, a terrifyingly rigid man named Awakens. Due to the notoriously glacial pace of Imperial bureaucracy, Commissar Awakens had officially been declared killed in action on 3 separate, documented occasions. Yet because the Administratum had not finalized the necessary termination paperwork, he simply continued showing up for work. He stalked the flooded trenches like a vengeful ghost, routinely executing any terrified soldier who dared to step 3 meters backward to avoid an incoming artillery shell. "Retreat is treason against the Golden Throne," he would relentlessly scream into the deafening barrage, seemingly completely oblivious to the fact that he was delivering this passionate, patriotic speech while standing directly atop a makeshift sandbag comprised entirely of decomposing human limbs. Meanwhile, a staggering 80 kilometers behind the front line, safely entrenched inside a pristine, climate-controlled bunker, sat the Lord General who actively mandated this endless slaughter. He had never once physically visited the front line. He had never smelled the suffocating stench of rotting mud. He spent his days comfortably sipping expensive amasec and drafting glowing, triumphant reports of continuous victory. To his completely insulated perspective, Trench 47B was nothing more than a tiny, glowing green dot on an expensive tactical screen. His entire military strategy revolved around a singular, desperate goal, ensuring that specific dot did not change color, regardless of the staggering mountain of human skulls required to maintain the illusion of success. The profound, heartbreaking tragedy of this situation was perhaps best understood by the abhumans deployed to the line. An Ogrin named Brack, a massive, childlike brute who possessed just enough cognitive capacity to count to 3, eventually turned to his exhausted sergeant in genuine confusion. "Boss," Brack rumbled, gesturing at the carnage surrounding them. "Why do we die in this hole all the time? Hole is bad, very wet, very cold." The sergeant, entirely stripped of all ideological pretense after a decade in the mud, simply stared into the fog and replied, "Because it is an order, Brack. Now pick up your gun and shoot at the shadows." And Brack immediately obeyed, completely highlighting the terrifying reality of the Imperium. Absolute, unquestioning obedience is infinitely more valuable than basic common sense. This was no longer a military campaign. It was a blind, endless ritual of mass human sacrifice, conducted entirely to appease a piece of paper. To genuinely appreciate the cosmic absurdity surrounding the blood-soaked mud of Trench 47B, you need to examine the terrifying mechanics of Imperial logistics themselves. Put yourself in the worn, muddy boots of a frontline soldier trying to apply basic tactical logic to a suicidal situation. The most fundamentally reasonable question any sentient being could ask under those circumstances would be, why do we not simply fall back 200 meters and establish a vastly superior, defensible position on higher ground? In a rational military organization, that tactical adjustment gets executed immediately, purely to preserve manpower. In the Astra Militarum, attempting to apply common sense is legally categorized as a symptom of creeping heresy. The official response from the upper echelons of command was completely devoid of tactical reasoning. The grim reality was that Trench 47B had been permanently registered on Strategic Positioning Form 884 Gamma 14 years prior to the current engagement. To physically move the defensive line backward would require entirely rewriting the designated coordinates, a bureaucratic process demanding the explicit, stamped approval of 7 different tiers of planetary administration. The command structure fundamentally calculated that it was more efficient to let an entire regiment die in a flooded hole than to force an Administratum clerk to process a requisition form for a new tactical map. This absolute devotion to outdated paperwork produced a logistical nightmare of breathtaking proportions. Every week, heavily armored transport vessels descended through the toxic clouds, stubbornly dropping thousands of barrels of ammunition, crates of expired, moldy rations, and terrified reinforcements directly into a landing zone that was already 70% controlled by the enemy. Command completely ignored the frantic reports that the drop site was overrun, simply because a 14-year-old document clearly stated the territory belonged to the Imperium. They continuously fed precious resources directly into the jaws of the enemy, entirely to avoid updating a spreadsheet. The futility of communication is best illustrated by a remarkably sane lieutenant who desperately transmitted a priority Vox message to rear headquarters. "Sir, we are completely out of manpower and the enemy is currently flanking our rear positions," he pleaded into the static. The official response, which finally arrived 3 agonizing days later, was a masterclass in disconnected bureaucracy. "Maintain current position. Reinforcements are currently en route. Ensure you completely fill out the 17 required pages of the personnel attrition and loss document before the end of shift." While the mud rose to their chests, the surviving soldiers were forced to adhere to a rigid, sacred daily ritual. Wake at 0400 hours to deafening artillery. Eat heavily irradiated, fuzzy porridge at 0500. Blindly fire lasguns into the impenetrable fog at 0600. Bury the shattered corpses of friends at 0700. And finally, fill out mandatory situation under control forms by 0800, carefully shielding the parchment from blood and rain. Within this suffocating ecosystem of madness, the cult Mechanicus provided its own unique brand of horrifying inefficiency. An ordained tech priest had been permanently assigned to this specific sector for 9 agonizing years, tasked entirely with the maintenance of a single, severely rusted heavy bolter. He reverently referred to the malfunctioning weapon as the blessed instrument of the Omnicia. Whenever the ancient weapon inevitably jammed mid-charge, the tech priest adamantly refused to simply swap the broken parts. Instead, he would initiate a complex 6-hour prayer ritual of appeasement, gently anointing the rusted barrel with sacred oils, while the soldiers around him were violently slaughtered. He chose prayer because submitting a formal request for a replacement firing pin historically took 3 standard years to process, making theology the only practical alternative available to him. However, the most heart-wrenching, beautifully tragic manifestation of this holy stupidity came from Brack, the massive, simple-minded Ogrin. Brack fundamentally could not comprehend the complex political reasons behind the slaughter, but he understood loyalty, and he remembered the Commissar's absolute command never to retreat. When a massive artillery strike shattered the line, threatening to push the survivors backward, Brack formulated his own innocent, horrifying solution. He gently lifted the mutilated corpse of a fallen guardsman, placed his dead friend securely upon his massive shoulder, and proudly announced to the empty fog, "Boss said hold position. This is my friend. I hold him here." He literally functioned as a living anchor, physically holding the dead bodies of his comrades to prevent them from retreating. This is the ultimate, undeniable truth of Imperial logistics. It is infinitely easier to sacrifice 1,000,000 human lives than it is to change a single sentence on a printed document. The most profoundly embarrassing aspect of the 14-year siege at Trench 47B is not the staggering Imperial death toll, nor the horrific living conditions. It's the severe psychological damage inflicted on the invading enemy itself. The corrupted forces of chaos initially descended on the mud-soaked continent with fanatical, terrifying zeal. They marched toward the Imperial lines, chanting dark, sanity-shattering praises to the Ruinous Powers, proudly carrying massive, gruesome banners stitched entirely from the flayed skin of fallen innocents. They arrived fully expecting a glorious, apocalyptic slaughter, anticipating the exquisite pleasure of breaking the spirit of the Emperor's loyal servants once and for all. But the chaotic nature of demons and madmen is entirely incompatible with the sheer, unyielding monotony of Imperial bureaucracy. After 3 grueling years of launching massive, blood-soaked assaults just to capture a few miserable inches of radioactive mud, the intoxicating thrill of the massacre completely evaporated. The dark rituals lost their luster. The demonic chants faded into exhausted groans. The fanatical cultists began to realize, one by one, that they were trapped in an endless, meaningless loop of violence. They were desperately trying to wage a glorious, apocalyptic crusade against a fundamentally bored, emotionally dead opponent who merely viewed their demonic invasion as an irritating interruption to scheduled paperwork. The sheer, grinding repetition completely broke the minds of the traitors long before it ever broke the defensive line. A towering chaos champion, a terrifying, heavily mutated warlord completely dedicated to the blood god Khorne, finally experienced a catastrophic mental breakdown. Standing atop a mountain of corpses, entirely bewildered by the stubborn refusal of the humans to die or surrender, he broke standard military protocol entirely. He hijacked an open Imperial Vox channel and screamed into the static with genuine exasperated confusion. "Are you still defending that miserable mudhole? Do you have absolutely no pride or tactical sense left?" The response he received from the Imperial side of the trench was not a grand, passionate speech about the glorious light of the Emperor. It was not a defiant, heroic declaration of unbreakable human spirit. A tired, utterly monotonous voice simply crackled over the radio and stated, "We have orders." That was the entire transmission. No soaring rhetoric, no fanatical hatred, no dramatic final stand. Just the cold, unfeeling, bureaucratic resignation of a soldier who was infinitely more terrified of his commissar's paperwork than he was of a 12-foot-tall demonic warlord swinging a Chinax. This singular deadpan sentence triggered a profound existential crisis within the Chaos ranks. How exactly do you psychologically break an enemy who is already completely, irreversibly dead inside? The dark entities of the warp feed exclusively on turbulent emotions, terror, despair, rage, agonizing sorrow. But the surviving soldiers of the 117th simply did not feel those things anymore. They only felt a mild, lingering annoyance at the freezing rain and a deep, profound exhaustion regarding the daily quota of ammunition forms. The demons were quietly starving to death, because the human soldiers were too administratively depressed to generate the proper psychic fear required to sustain an apocalypse. This remains the ultimate, unforgivable insult to the majestic terror of the dark gods. They unleashed the absolute, apocalyptic fury of the warp, opening the very gates of hell itself, and their grand conquest was completely, definitively halted by an exhausted clerk's clerical error. The Chaos forces were not defeated by brilliant, sweeping tactical maneuvers, or the blinding, holy light of a living saint. They were fundamentally bored to death by a sprawling, immovable bureaucracy that stubbornly refused to update its spreadsheets. In the grim darkness of the far future, absolute cosmic evil is utterly powerless against the sheer, unyielding weight of middle management. To fully understand the staggering disconnect between the orchestrators of this tragedy and the victims bleeding in the mud, shift your attention 80 kilometers behind the front line. Deep within a heavily fortified, climate-controlled command bunker sits the Lord General of the campaign. He is a proud, decorated graduate of the elite Schola Progenium, a man whose chest is heavily adorned with prestigious medals awarded for campaigns he entirely observed through a telescope. He has spent decades meticulously studying the brilliant, sweeping tactical maneuvers of Lord Solar Macarius, firmly believing that intergalactic warfare is an elegant, sophisticated game of chess played by visionary gentlemen. He has a brilliant tactical staff and a massive glowing hololithic map, completely insulating him from the suffocating stench of burning flesh a lifetime away. All of his pristine academic brilliance and prestigious military education violently disintegrated the moment it collided with the stagnant reality of Trench 47B. The Lord General continuously stared at the singular, glowing green dot on his expensive tactical display, completely failing to comprehend why his brilliant strategies weren't immediately resulting in a glorious breakthrough. He viewed the battlefield as a dynamic equation that simply required the correct tactical input, entirely oblivious to the fact that he was actively feeding his men into a static, unyielding meat grinder. His sprawling staff officers continued confidently pushing tiny, abstracted icons across the board, completely detached from the horrifying reality that moving a small plastic token 2 inches to the left translated to 30,000 men drowning in radioactive mud. Desperate to break the 14-year stalemate and secure his impending promotion, the Lord General began transmitting increasingly frantic, profoundly disconnected orders to the surviving frontline commanders. Execute a rapid surprise flanking maneuver through the eastern sector, he confidently commanded over the pristine Vox network. The weary, deadpan response from the trench immediately shattered his illusion. The eastern sector currently consists of a 3-mile-wide open mass grave, sir. We physically cannot run over a mountain of our own rotting dead. Undeterred, he pivoted to another textbook strategy. Utilize the sudden inclement weather to mask a stealth infiltration. The completely exhausted reply crackled back through the static. Sir, this specific inclement weather pattern has been completely stationary over our exact position for 11 consecutive years. The enemy is quite accustomed to the rain. The absolute breaking point for the Lord General's monumental ego arrived during a routine status update. Sitting in his comfortable leather-bound chair, swirling a glass of incredibly expensive amasec, he finally decided to ask a direct, unfiltered question. He keyed the master voxcaster, his voice trembling slightly with suppressed frustration, and demanded an exact physical head count of the forces currently holding the line. He fully expected to hear that a battered but functional battalion was valiantly holding the perimeter, patiently waiting for his brilliant order to finally advance. He expected the crisp, disciplined voice of a frontline officer, ready to execute the Emperor's divine will. The vox crackled with the terrifying, deafening sound of incoming artillery, followed by the hollow, utterly broken voice of the senior surviving officer. If we are strictly counting personnel who are still physically capable of standing upright, we currently have 17 men, sir, the officer reported, his tone entirely devoid of hope or fear. The Lord General froze, his mind frantically trying to process the impossible mathematics of defending 3 kilometers of trench with 17 exhausted souls. Before he could speak, the officer delivered the final, devastating punchline. However, we do have approximately 400 freshly deceased bodies that we are currently utilizing as structural sandbags to keep the eastern wall from completely collapsing. The Lord General sat in agonizing, profound silence for a very long time. The brilliant tactician, the decorated hero of the Schola Progenium, finally experienced a complete, irreversible ego death. He realized with terrifying clarity that his entire prestigious career, his shining medals, and his absolute authority were completely dependent on a singular mud hole currently guarded by 17 corpses pretending to be alive. With a fractured, defeated voice, he simply replied, "Excellent work. Maintain your position. That means we still officially control the trench." He was no longer a glorious warlord conquering the stars. He was merely an overpaid, profoundly pathetic babysitter for a sprawling mass grave, desperately pretending that the dead were still following his brilliant commands. Beneath the suffocating layer of bitter irony and absurd bureaucratic comedy, there lies a profound, genuinely heartbreaking tragedy that completely defines the human experience in the 41st millennium. Trench 47B is not merely a tactical blunder or a humorous anecdote about administrative inefficiency. It is the absolute purest monument to the ultimate devaluation of human life. Stripped of all the soaring imperial propaganda, the golden statues, the glorious hymns of the ecclesiarchy, this flooded, rotting scar in the earth represents the true foundation of the Emperor's realm. It is a system that demands infinite sacrifice and offers absolutely zero redemption, meticulously designed to consume the innocent and reward the apathetic. Within that claustrophobic nightmare, countless micro-tragedies unfolded quietly in the dark, entirely ignored by the vast, uncaring cosmos. There was the ordinary, terrified guardsman sitting waist-deep in freezing water, using a piece of charcoal to write a desperate, loving letter to his family in a distant hive city, a letter he fundamentally knew would never, ever leave the confines of the mud. There was the veteran commissar, who had completely lost his mind a decade ago, yet continued to mechanically enforce dress code regulations during artillery bombardments, because the rigid rulebook was the only remaining anchor tethering him to reality. They were entirely stripped of their humanity, reduced to mere numbers on a spreadsheet, yet they stubbornly clung to these small, pathetic fragments of a life they would never see again. There was Brack, the massive, simple-minded Ogrin, who fundamentally lacked the cognitive capacity to understand politics, religion, or the grand mechanics of the galaxy. He possessed hands permanently stained with the blood of unimaginable horrors, and he would still offer a genuine, heartwarming smile every single time a dying sergeant gently patted his armored shoulder and called him a good boy. These men did not march into the meat grinder out of a profound, ideological hatred for the chaotic forces of the warp. They did not die for a glorious, uplifting vision of a better future. They died purely, simply, and exclusively because a piece of paper emphatically stated they were not permitted to live anywhere else. One day, when the unyielding siege of Trench 47B eventually concludes, whether the position finally falls to the exhausted enemy or is officially declared secured by a fresh wave of millions, the universe will not pause to mourn. There will be no grand, sweeping orchestral score, no angelic choirs descending from the heavens to carry the fallen heroes to the Emperor's side. The cosmic wheel will simply continue to turn, entirely indifferent to the staggering ocean of blood spilled in the dirt. The monumental sacrifice of 1,000,000 beating hearts will not alter the fundamental trajectory of the galaxy by a single microscopic degree. The bureaucratic aftermath will be swift, sterile and profoundly insulting. The Administratum Munitorum will seamlessly move the designation Trench 47B from the active engagement ledger to the archived historical database, permanently burying the tragedy under mountains of red tape. The Lord General, sitting safely in his bunker, will receive a prestigious, glittering promotion for his steadfast, uncompromising defense of vital Imperial territory. 4 decades later, a starving, miserable family living in the suffocating depths of a manufacturing hive city will receive a cheap, mass-produced posthumous medal through the automated mail system, entirely unaware of the specific mudhole that consumed their child. Ultimately, the millions of broken bodies, the shattered lasguns, and the unread letters will remain permanently entombed within the trench. They will slowly, silently sink into the freezing crust of the earth, entirely forgotten by the empire they bled to protect, until the dead planet itself eventually cracks and fades into the eternal void of space. This is the absolute, terrifying truth of the Imperium of Man, written entirely in blood and mud, in the cold, unforgiving mathematics of human survival. A single strategically worthless hole in the ground is mathematically proven to be vastly more eternal than 1,000,000 human souls. There is a specific kind of horror in numbers that never resolve into anything. If Trench 47B had fallen in the first year, it would be a footnote, a single tragic loss absorbed into the vast statistical churn of a galaxy that measures its wars in centuries. If it had been won cleanly in the first year, it would be a footnote too, a minor victory, forgotten by the Second Black Crusade that came after it. What makes 14 years of stalemate uniquely horrifying is that the trench never resolves into either category. It simply continues. Every year that passes adds another layer of bodies to the foundation, another cohort of 17-year-old conscripts who will be dead within the season, another stack of forms that nobody above the rank of lieutenant will ever actually read. The Administratum does not track this as an ongoing tragedy. It tracks it as a line item with a consistent, predictable burn rate. Somewhere on Terra, an actuary reviewing regional attrition statistics sees the 117th Regiment's continuous replacement requisitions and simply notes that the sector is operating within expected parameters. There is no flag raised. There is no review triggered. 1,000,000 deaths spread across 14 years, when averaged into a spreadsheet cell, produces a number small enough to look completely unremarkable next to the neighboring columns. This is, in its own quiet way, more disturbing than any single dramatic atrocity the Imperium commits elsewhere in the galaxy. Exterminatus is horrifying because it is instantaneous and total, a single, undeniable moment where a world's entire population ceases to exist. Trench 47B is horrifying because it is the opposite. It is death stretched so thin, distributed so evenly across so many years and so many replacement drafts, that no single moment of it ever registers as a crisis. Nobody experiences the 1,000,000 deaths at once. They experience them one at a time, 17-year-olds arriving fresh off the dropship and departing within the week, in a rhythm so consistent it stops registering as loss and starts registering as weather. In a forgotten trench that will never be recorded in any glorious historical archive, the absolute last surviving soldier of the 117th Regiment sits quietly among the rotting corpses of his friends. He is not angry at the universe. He does not scream at the heavens to ask why he was condemned to this hell. He simply tightens his grip on his completely depleted, rusted lasgun, stares blankly into the eternal rolling fog, and whispers softly to the ghosts surrounding him. The orders were to hold the line. The Emperor protects, and so does Trench 47B. Good morning, Segmentum Obscurus. It's a beautiful Emperor-blessed Tuesday out there, so let's check out that local planetary commute. Looking at the tactical augurs this morning, we are seeing some absolutely massive congestion down at Trench 47B. We've got a 14-year pileup involving approximately 1,000,000 unburied corpses, causing severe delays across the entire eastern sector. So if you're deploying that way for your morning bayonet charge, you might want to save some time and just reroute directly through the active minefield. Moving on to the sector weather forecast, Expect heavy, localized showers of radioactive promethium right around noon, followed by a 100% chance of a completely unwarranted orbital bombardment. So remember to pack your umbrella, your gas mask, and a fully signed acceptance of martyrdom form before you leave the bunker. This hour of uninterrupted propaganda is brought to you by Corp's starch breakfast cereal, now manufactured with 10% more recycled local hero. Up next, a quick word from your local commissariat, right after these mandatory commercial messages.